Hi there. If you're watching this, I certainly appreciate it. We're going to go through the second slide deck today, which is going to review that hierarchy of two-dimensional shapes that we've been working with. I will be just kind of pointing out some really important characteristics that different quadrilaterals share and what makes them unique. So I'm really glad you're listening because that will help prepare you for this Thursday's check-in. So let's move on to the first slide. It should look familiar as we completed one like this yesterday. So we're going to be taking a look at the different angles that these shapes have. These shapes are not all quadrilaterals, but if you recall, when we sort or classify two-dimensional shapes, we're either looking at the type of angles the shape has or their sides. So if we look at this pentagon, five-sided shape, we're looking to see what type of angles it has. So if I'm looking here, this opens up to larger than 90 degrees. So if you recall, larger than 90 degrees is an obtuse angle. Let's move on to this right triangle. This right triangle has a right angle here. I'll just mark that. And then these angles are smaller than 90 degrees, so that makes them acute angles. If we go over here to this trapezoid, this shape that has one pair of parallel sides, we'll investigate its angles. I see an acute angle here. And up on top, we have two obtuse angles. So now you're ready to go. Mark or select your X's. You could drag them. We're going to call this a shape with only acute angles. We've identified this triangle as having a right angle, so it's a right triangle, and it's got two acute angles. And this trapezoid here has acute angles, and we're missing an X. So I'm going to make sure I double that for your slide. We'd also be putting an X here. So I'm just going to draw my X right now. X. Your slide will have enough X's when you complete this task. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Here we're going to be taking a look at how the sides are related to one another. We're going to be looking for either parallel lines or perpendicular lines. Remember, parallel lines never intersect. Perpendicular lines intersect or meet or cross to form right angles. So if I'm looking at this quadrilateral here, 1, 2, 3, 4 shapes, I see a right angle here. So that tells me that this side and this side are perpendicular. This shape has no parallel lines. So it is just a quadrilateral. There are no parallel lines there. But there is one pair of perpendicular sides. We look over here at this trapezoid, I see a parallel pair of sides there. And I also see two right angles. So this shape has both parallel lines and perpendicular lines. We have some right angles and some parallel sides. This hexagon does not have any right angles here, so there's no perpendicular signs, but it does have 3 sets of parallel lines. So parallel, parallel, parallel. There we go. Let's move on to the third task. So here there's some statements, and we have to decide if the statement is true or false. So this says a trapezoid is a quadrilateral. Well, trapezoid was back here on this side, and it is a quadrilateral because it does have 4 sides. So we're going to say that's always true. It's not sometimes true, it's always true. A rhombi is a parallelogram. So if you recall, this would be an example of a rhombi, one rhombus. A rhombus is always a quadrilateral. True or false? Well, I would say that's always true. Is a rhombi always a parallelogram? Well, it does have to have two parallel sides, so that's going to also be always true. Not sometimes true, it's always true. And a parallelogram is a rectangle. Well, let's see. This is a parallelogram because it's a rhombus. Is this a rectangle? Are all rectangles parallelograms? Yes, but are all parallelograms rectangles? No, some are. So we're going to put an X there. This next task, you did this yesterday. You have to decide how you're going to sort these shapes. And remember, you're going to be either sorting them based on the type of angles they have or how their sides are related or possibly even both. So like yesterday, you're going to sort these shapes and then you're going to explain by typing how you sorted those shapes. So maybe you wanted to say, all right, I want to put all shapes with only right angles, or shapes that have, only right angles. We could put those there. Some right angles, if we wanted that to be our characteristic, we could put, these have some right angles, these have no right angles, although I think I'd need a protractor to measure that one. I'm not quite sure. So you're going to have to decide how you want to group those and then explain that on your next slide. And finally, like yesterday, you're given a statement and you have to decide whether that statement is true or false by dragging that over the proper word, and then you're going to explain how you know. All squares are rhombi, so all rhombi are squares. Well, let's think about that for a second. If I were to draw a square here, so there's a square, and we'll draw a rhombus next to it, a rhombi next to it. And let's just read those statements again. All squares are rhombi. Well, remember, a rhombus is a parallelogram that has equal sides. So are all squares, do they fit that characteristic? Well, a square has equal sides, and a square is a parallelogram. Opposite sides are parallel. So I guess this part of the sentence is true. All squares are rhombi. But now let's look at this part. So all rhombi are squares. Well, does this look like a square to you? Think about that for a minute. All squares are rhombi. Yes, that's true. But are all rhombi squares? What does this part of the sentence do to this statement? If you're thinking really hard, you're going to say, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense here. So that's false. And you're going to type here, why or when would a rhombi not be a square? You can kind of use this picture to describe that. Okay, I look forward to seeing your slide decks with good work. Thank you.